Alright, g'day guys, welcome back to True Eagle. Today I am going to be having a crack at plotting our best 23 to take on Port Adelaide with, the players that we know are going to be unavailable. Obviously, I'm recording this a week out from when the team's going to get announced, so obviously things can change in terms of who's going to be available, touch wood. But what I'm going to do is go through the players that are definitely not available and some players that are going to be available for round one based on what we've been told by the club. And then I'm going to tell you my best 23 and I'm going to put up some very poorly made graphics so you can get a bit of a visual aid as to how I see the team shaping up. So it's a bit of a combination of preference and prediction. But first of all, let's start off talking about the guys we know are not going to be available, who are probably best 23, or at least in my estimation. So Dom Sheed, he's got a foot injury for about 6 to 8 weeks. That is the official timeline given to us on the West Coast Eagles injury report, which we know is famously accurate. Elijah Hewitt, he's listed as a TBC. I would be playing him in round one if he were available. When I say TBC though, it does sound like it's on the better end rather than, those bad TBCs or like back in the day when Nat Nui was just listed as late season. This one does sound kind of positive. And again, it could be subject to spin, but Hewitt's at least running, he's pain free. And for a long-term prospect like that, I'm happy to be patient with that. But either way, not going to feature for round one. Matthew Flynn, we already know about. He would have been playing in this team as the number one ruck. And Liam Ryan, who's listed as about 4 to 6 weeks with our hamstring, also would be in this team, but is unavailable. To cover off some of the injuries we know about, Rhett Bazzo still listed as a groin. I wouldn't have him in this team. Same thing with Jai Cully, 4 to 5 weeks coming back from that ACL, so not a bad recovery time frame for him. Sounds like he's in pretty good shape considering. Harry Edwards is probably immediate depth for us, barring an injury to McGovern or Barras. But he's listed as 2 to 3 weeks away, recovering from finger surgery, I think it was. Clay Hall's touch and go. Had he played in the preseason and played well, maybe he would have found his way into this team. But he's still 1 to 2 weeks away with an ankle. So coming off an injury layoff, I'm not going to slot him into the round one team. And Archer Reed is still recovering from the knee injury he had prior to being drafted. And they list him as about 8 to 10 weeks. So again, slow and steady with him. So those are the eliminated, the excluded players. And there's a few players that have been listed that are returned from injury and should be fit for round one. So being specific on that, we know Oscar Allen will come back. Tyler Brockman should come back, and I'm going to include him as available for this team. Ruben Jimby was the player that slipped my mind when I was covering the Adelaide game, talking about players that might come in. So we're going to assume Ruben Jimby's fit. Josh Rotherham and Zane True are also going to be fit for minutes, but I'm certain those guys are going to be playing waffle. So, without further ado, let's crack into the team that I would select to go into round one against Port Adelaide. So, let's start with the back six. I think the key position backs are pretty self-explanatory with McGovern and Barras, and then Brady Hoff probably playing that third tall role. I do prefer him to someone like a Rotherham, who's not going to probably be fully fit for this game anyway, but Brady Hoff, certainly in that hybrid role, is the man for me. Liam Duggan is the captain. He will certainly play. Tom Collar's the other player I have starting on the field. Now, Harley Reid I've got on half-back flank here. I realise when the team actually gets named, they might put him in the centre, and on top of that, they probably will start him at the centre bounce, just for a bit of flair, but either way, it doesn't matter. He will be playing a combination of halfback and midfield. So that's the back six that I've got, and we'll move into the midfield now. So the centre line of Elliot Yeo, Tim Kelly, and Ruben Jinby, actually, it's not too bad, assuming we get these guys playing together with a bit of synergy. I think there's a good mix there. Kelly is probably the most advanced midfielder in that mix, playing as the guy who drives the ball inside 50. Yo is a bit more of the genuine big-bodied bull extracted there, and you could say the same thing about Jinby, but we don't know if he's going to play more of a defensive role. But either way, there's a good mix of tackling ability and skill inside 50. Jaden Hunt on a wing picks himself, absolutely. One of our best players he's become. And then Gaff. I think Gaff makes this team, partly due to, a lack of competition for that spot. Probably Luke Edwards and Campbell Chesser are the other wingmen I'd have competing for that spot. But I think, Gaff starts round one in this team. And then he's obviously got to fight to keep it. But I think he will, to be honest. Whether or not he's going to have a great season, I'm not sure. But I think he'll do enough to add value to this team. That's what I'm hoping for. Obviously, with no Matt Flynn, we've got Bailey, Williams, and then ruck. And I'll talk about the second ruck option shortly. Let's talk about the forward line. Now, Allen, Darling, and Waterman are my starting 3 trio. Now, in this scenario, we don't have a second ruck picked. So I'm guessing that we might go with Jake Waterman in the ruck. Maybe Darling does a bit of the forward rucking, kind of how we saw it at times last year, certainly when Jake Waterman was in the team. I think with both Marek and Waterman available, I wouldn't go in with Jack Williams as the second ruck, even though he probably is the best equipped to play the second ruck role. Waterman is a better forward and should play in this team. So I realise that's a bit of a deficiency, but that's kind of what happens when your number one ruck goes down and we don't have too many experienced options underneath. Noah Long, Jamie Cripps, these guys pick themselves. Jamie Cripps ended the year really well last year. He's in great shape. Apparently Noah Long looks like he's certainly physically changed, and I think the preseason showed, a bit of a step up in confidence. And then I think Tyler Brockman does come into this round one team, and he's another one who we could see rotate on ball. So in addition to the midfielders that I've named here, you get midfield rotations from Harley Reid down back, and a little bit from Brockman. I'm not expecting a lot, but a little bit. So I think a lot of that team picks itself. So let's go through the bench. I think there's probably going to be some reasonable consensus on the 18 that I've picked here. And then the bench, it got a little bit murkier. So Witherden, I think, makes this team. And I've picked Jermaine Jones as the sub here. Not because I rate him more than Witherden. I actually probably would prefer to see him in the side more than I would Witherden, but Witherden did have a pretty good preseason. And you factor in Jermaine Jones is coming off a bit of an injury and played in the waffle in their scratch match. So I'd have him as the sub because I think he's best 23 on talent, but I couldn't pick another defender in there. So I think in the pecking order, Jermaine Jones is behind him. Ryan Marek is the forward in this scenario. Again, he could play third tall, could play a little bit higher up the ground. I think he's too talented to leave out of this team, to be honest. Then I've picked a couple of other players in Edwards and Petrocelli. Now, these are players that we could have a little bit more differing opinions on. I think Edwards has just done enough this preseason to suggest he's probably in the mix, especially when you consider some of the injuries we've got. If Dom Sheed comes back into this team, Edwards is probably the first to go. And Petrocelli I like as well for his versatility. He can play on any line really, but he's probably going to take a forward flank for the most part and then maybe line up a few stoppages. So just to cover off the midfield rotations there, you've got Petrocelli, Edwards, Brockman and Reid as rotating through this midfield, in addition to, Jinby, Kelly, Yeo, Gaff and Hunt. So that's about 8. I think that's enough. Is it deep? No. Is it strong? No. But hopefully one of these two players, surprise us and have some really good performances. But, we've talked about the midfield being a deficiency. So normally we name 4 emergencies. I've probably got 5 here that I expect to be maybe the next rung into this team. I don't think Cohen Livingston is a million miles from getting into this team, purely because, he probably looks a little bit more AFL ready than Barnett, which is kind of crazy. Maybe Jack Williams is another contender to come into this side as ruck depth. I really don't know if they're going to go with a second ruck. That will play out. Livingston and Williams, they're probably the next cabs off the rank in that respect. Callum Jamieson probably looks more like a key defender here, and maybe he could make the list as an emergency because Edwards and Basil are unavailable, so Jamieson maybe is an emergency coming in as a key defender. Campbell Shesso, you could put him in for Luke Edwards, you could put him in for Petrocelli even. I selected Petrocelli because I think on current form he is a slightly better player and he's versatile. Chesser, if it's the choice of him playing as the sub in this game or getting a full game in the waffle on ball, that's probably my preference, to be honest. And Jermaine Jones as a sub also has versatility. Maybe not as a midfielder, but he can certainly play, in the back line, and he can play as a small forward. He played as a small forward in round 1 for us last year. And, we could see, given the injuries to some of the younger types, we could see Locke Rawlinson named as an emergency in this game. I don't think he's a million miles off either. Not a realistic chance to debut, in my opinion, because I think it would come at the cost of some of the other small types like Cripps, Brockman, and Long. I suppose it does kind of depend on whether Brockman's fits. So for whatever reason, Brockman's not available for this game. Could we see Locke Rawlinson debut? I wouldn't bet on it, but I also wouldn't rule it out. So that is my best 23 to take on Port Adelaide. I really do think that on paper, that team is a big improvement there to what we saw for extended periods last year. I think that's a given. I think in the previous video I talked about how we're going to have 9 changes from the last time we played Port Adelaide, and 1 was a downgrade. There was probably another 50-50 and the others were all clear upgrades. So in theory, we should see a much improved West Coast. But let me know in the comments, guys, what do you think of this best 23 that I've got here? Did I forget anyone? It is entirely possible, but I canvassed a few different websites just to make sure I wasn't forgetting anyone obvious. It'd be an interesting test for us as well to try and keep this team together for at least a few weeks. If we can get through the first few weeks, then we should have a bit more added depth in Cully coming back into fitness, Rhett Bazzo, Harry Edwards for another one, maybe Zane True, starts the year well and we just look a little bit deeper. Clay Hall's another one. So fingers crossed it all goes well to start the season. I don't think that's a terrible best 22, but let me know in the comments what you think, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Cheers.